You are listening to Radiant Creators, a collaborative project composed of people whose passion, purpose, and dedication requires forging their own unique path of empowerment and livelihood. A Radiant Creator isn't making a living, they are living.
Welcome home, Radiant Creators. Today, in special collaboration with Hester from Alternate Current Radio, we are interviewing Minds.com CEO Bill Ottman. We cover many topics, including new features coming to Minds soon, prominent and increasing censorship in mainstream media and social media, Bill's motivations in creating Minds, security of user data, and how censorship is driving many new users to Minds. Some of the exciting new features are Jitsi, a video conferencing system similar to Skype. Also, Nomad, which would be truly a decentralized blockchain social media. Okay, let's drop into the show. Enjoy. Right now, there are the 5 big companies that own really most of the media in the country, possibly the world, and the social media giants that really are a part of that. Do you believe that they kind of became mutated into the censorship monster they are today? Or were they always created from the very beginning to be sort of the authoritarian censorship state that they are trying to create?
I think they were always censorship platforms. They also help facilitate human communication to a degree. But, I mean, if you just look at their content policies, then it was never fully focused on free speech. It was always surveillance based. So, yeah, I think that the intentions, it's hard to speculate on the intentions of the founders of all of these companies. I think that a lot of them conduct these practices without really understanding the negative implications, but it doesn't really change the fact that that's what they're doing.
Yeah, in the end, that's what is happening. And then I'll pass it over to for a sec. Is there anything you want to say to expound on that?
Well, I'm curious what you think of, like, In-Q-Tel, for example, which is basically a CIA front. Well, not a front, but they put seed money into companies like Facebook, Twitter, and Google, and the companies that take In-Q-Tel money aren't really shy about publicizing what they're up to. There's one called GeoSymbol that has announced a product called Geo X-Ray, which monitors social media chatter based on location and stuff like this. And then, of course, we've had the selling of Facebook user information to political forecasting companies and such. So I don't know. How do you feel about that? I mean, it must be a little bit daunting to be running a social media platform that is competing with something that has that kind of stuff behind it.
Yeah, it's a lot of money and influence and power that is behind all of these huge companies. But they all started small too. So. And we're growing quickly, and we just actually did a funding round from some investors that are more aligned philosophically. So I think that, when you partner with a CIA front venture firm, you know what you're getting into. So I think that, that it sort of speaks for itself. But at the same time, I think that it is possible to, be independent. You're not necessarily representative of everyone who invests in you. So like last year, we did an equity crowdfunding round where 1,500 people from all over the world invested in Minds. We raised like $1 million in like 2 weeks. And at all different levels of investment, anywhere from $100 to $100,000, people invested, and now they have shares. And so that's a beautiful thing that we were able to bring the community into the process and the ownership structure. And at the same time, I'm pretty sure that I don't agree with, everything with everything that all of the investors in Minds think. Not obviously they don't have like the ability to dictate the direction of the company. And so, you know, that's where you get into different degrees of power that, you know, a regular investor versus like an investor that becomes a board member or has like majority stake. But I think that at the end of the day, the actions and the code of the company speaks for itself. So we're fully free and open source. So all of our software is publicly available for anyone to do basically anything they want with, as long as they acknowledge us as in the credits and everyone else who's contributed to it in the credits. And, you know, none of the mainstream technology companies are open source. So you know off the bat that their intentions aren't really in the right place. They're also all surveillance based. So the source of the money matters, but I guess investors that have done bad things can potentially do good things and invest in good things. I mean, you know, these are mega corporations. It's very complex systems. It's not just a unified set of interests. There's often competing interests within these mega corporations and or venture companies or whoever. So I think that if the company is conducting ethical practices and it's transparent to the public what is happening, then that is the primary, most important component.
It makes sense, especially with competing interests. And eventually a company is so big, it doesn't know what all of itself is doing. It's kind of like you could look at the kind of environmental disaster that, let's say McDonald's is when it comes to the unhealthy beef that they're selling. But at the same time, they do give to environmental causes. So it all becomes sort of a paradox.
That nuance and understanding of complexity is so important with figuring out ways to actually evolve corporations to move more towards the ethical sides of things. And because we know that these are complex systems with competing interests, we should target the interests that align with what we're trying to accomplish within those companies and help those companies transform, as opposed to polarizing the issue and saying that every mega corporation is just, you know, needs to be, deleted from the face of reality, which isn't even really possible.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. And that's, if you're kind of a bit of a cunning person, you can get in there and you can exploit the megaliths for good purposes. Yeah. Well, before we get into mines, I wanted to ask, because, you know, here at Radiant Creators, one of our real, edges that we like to explore is, we interview inspiring people to inspire others. And so you're definitely an inspiring person. So before we get into mines specifically, what was that yellow brick road, I would call it, that led you to be where you're at right now? I mean, what's your background and what inspired you to, work in technology, and especially what got you here to this moment?
We're still on the yellow brick road. It has always been important to me to bring people together. Before I was involved in tech, I organized large-scale music festivals like Gathering of the Vibes, which is a big festival in Connecticut and sometimes in New York, which, brings in like 30,000 people for a weekend, art and music and some, cause-based stuff. It's not going anymore, and I organize independent music festivals too. So, and I've always been really fascinated with gathering people and crowds and doing those kinds of experiments. So we would also do these forums back when I lived in Vermont and after I graduated from UVM, which we actually called Gathering of the Minds. And they would be forums / open mics / concerts. And so we would do them around a cause. Like, for instance, we did one where the University of Vermont, we found, was invested in all of these war manufacturers, weapons manufacturers. And obviously that didn't really jive with the ethos that we thought we were a part of. And, when you really look into the divestment movement, most universities have really questionable portfolios. So we dug into that issue. We got lots of different student groups together, professors, and ultimately we got the university to divest from a number of weapons manufacturers in the stock portfolio. It took like many months, but so we would do these forums, but we would also balance it out with art and music. But then that wasn't really scaling. And so we had this platform for events and causes, but it just, it was very local and it was working on a local level, but it wasn't scaling. So, and I was sort of anti-tech, to be honest, back in the day. I didn't like social media. I didn't like what it was doing to people. But then I started to dig a little bit deeper and understand the difference between free and open source technology and proprietary technology, also, surveillance-based systems versus encrypted systems. And that within tech, just like within, food, organic food, conventional food, GMO, there's all different types. And we need to be feeding the types that are more healthy and are more just transparent and community generated. So it all is on the same path. I mean, I've always been pretty obsessed with freedom of information, and yeah, it just made sense. It was the path to communicating these ideas to more people. And now I don't really differentiate that much between nature and technology. I think that technology is a part of our nature, and we need to really cleanse the global system. This isn't something that people are really aware of, just like they weren't aware of the issue with food 20 years ago. And now that's pretty much commonplace. Most people want to eat local organic food. Maybe not most, but I mean, it's an unstoppable movement. So I think the same is happening with apps now.
With Minds.com, the code that actually creates and runs Minds, so people can actually download that, I believe, from GitHub, and they can actually run their own version of Minds?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to ask, along with that, do you know of people doing that? I mean, have any organizations or interest groups actually just created their own Minds and they're kind of off the grid with it and they're having a good time? I mean, is that actually being implemented?
A few smaller ones. We, having the developer tools matured enough so that is easy has been something that we've been working really hard on over the last year, specifically. Even right now, where we're implementing a public API with GraphQL to help with accessing our platform, but also, we have a Docker instance so that people can spin up our nodes. And a handful, mostly developers, mostly experimental. We actually haven't put much energy into that just because we've been so focused on Minds.com itself and building up that community and making sure that the tech on Minds.com is mature enough in order to start replicating and creating more nodes, because you don't really want to replicate a system that isn't ready. So we're close.
I like that. That's amazing. I'll pass it over to Hester.
Hey, Bill, we run a show over here at Alternate Current Radio called Boiler Room, and it's been going on 4 years now. And one of our ongoing topics throughout the whole length of the show has been privacy and, the growing feeling that the general public is starting to grasp that there is an actual technocracy that's being built fundamentally for us all around the world now, and it's centered there in Silicon Valley. So one of the things that we've talked about a lot in recent years is, especially since the election, is the algorithms that are being used. So what can you tell us about the algorithms of Minds.com versus the algorithms of the proprietary platforms? Because I've noticed that, for example, I'm experiencing the effects of shadow banning on Twitter and sandboxing on Facebook with my accounts that I use to advertise our radio show. And I also noticed recently we were in a group chat on Facebook Messenger, and we tried to share our Minds.com account link to one of our listeners and good friends over there, and Facebook put they have a new layer of algorithm that we hadn't seen before, and they wouldn't let our message go through on the messenger because we used your URL there. So I'm curious, how you feel about shadow banning and the algorithms of the proprietary platforms versus Minds.com.
Yeah, that's quite an escalation of their tactics to stop competing platforms. The fact that you cannot even send a Minds link through Messenger, and it's ironic because they were saying that I think that we were unsecure, even though we've never been hacked. Everything we do is encrypted, open source. Anyone can inspect it to make sure we're not. And we've certainly never been hacked for 50 million users like Facebook just was, or have ever, shared anyone's data with anybody. So that is sort of an irony. And in terms of the algorithms, so on Minds, the default news feed actually doesn't even use an algorithm and really won't ever, because we think that it should always be 100% chronological and unfiltered so that you're always receiving the posts of the people that you subscribe to, and that it's, the onus is on you to, if you don't like what someone is posting or they're posting too much, you can unsubscribe from them. Now, we do have alternative feeds. Like we just rolled out an alternative top feed where you can see the trending content on the site. You can also subscribe to different hashtags for specific categories that you want feeds of. And, but the difference is that on Facebook and now Instagram and, Twitter and YouTube, the default feeds are secret algorithms. We don't even know what exactly they are, of many variables that determine what you're seeing. So it's not based on time. It's based on your engagement. It's based on what they want you to see as opposed to what you want to see. So yeah, it's a huge problem. I mean, they're basically manipulating people. They know that they can mold public consciousness through their newsfeed. They know that they can feed you ads, and they know that they can affect your behavior. So that's what they're doing.
Yeah, it's pretty scary, man. I mean, that was a huge hack, and it's just amazing to me that, they can try to say, oh, that's an unsecure platform. It's similar to, I'm sure you're familiar with what's happened to Gab.com recently. Gab, they have been deplatformed by some of their information technology infrastructure hosts, who are, of course, from some of these big proprietary, Fortune 500 monster tech companies, and they really had no reason there. But it's scary to see that a lot of people call it the mainstream media. I'm trying to move that into the mass media cartel. But the mass media cartel gets behind Silicon Valley and some of these big tech interests and say that, oh, that platform is, they try to frame it as though it's like built by and for, only right-leaning people or only alt-right people, or if they want to get, really, really out there, they'll say it's for, nationalists or white nationalists, try to make it about some sort of ethno-nationalist political thing, when really, in all reality, as far as I can tell, Gab's only political platform is one of promoting free speech. And I feel like what you're doing at Minds.com is very similar. And, you look at what Twitter does and what the mainstream media does in supporting these talking points, and they'll point to maybe one anonymous user on Gab who put up something that they find distasteful, and say that, oh, look, it's a racist platform. Yet if you look into Twitter's feeds deep in there, you'll find all kinds of just really not safe for work, sort of degenerate, hateful, all kinds of crazy comments. I mean, you'll find ISIS terrorist accounts up there that haven't been taken down. So there's a lot of even worse than the pot calling the kettle black. And I'm curious, is that something that Minds.com is concerned about, the way the mass media cartels can try to change public opinion about a platform or a company, and at the same time not do that, not hold the big tech companies to the same standards?
Yeah, that is a big problem. I mean, and the interesting part is that Facebook has really betrayed even the mainstream media. So the algorithms on Facebook affected every brand, because now you're only reaching 3 to 5% of your own audience organically. So even though Facebook and Google are constantly betraying everybody, mainstream and alternative, for some reason, well, we know the reason. What happened to Gab was not warranted. Granted, I think that they do have sort of a polarizing tone coming from the executive team of that company. They're also proprietary. I personally don't like it, but I don't agree with what is happening to them. I think that their content policy is more sensible than the content policy on Facebook and Twitter, which is just totally inconsistent and doesn't really make logical sense, even from solving the stance of solving social problems. And censorship tends to amplify violence and extremism. Now, it was horrible what happened with that shooter, but shooters are live streaming on Facebook and Twitter probably more often than that. So yeah, the whole thing is inconsistent. There is I think, fear from the mainstream media of, a right-wing network getting too big. And so that's why they did what they did to Gab. And because it is a right-wing, I mean, I'm not saying everyone on that network is right-wing, but the executives on that network are, and they're not portraying a balanced, neutral tone, which I believe is necessary for a network to scale. Like, I don't personally buy into the left-right paradigm at all. And I think that it's going to be really hard to create a solution that is accepted by everybody unless you're just tone matters. And I'm not trying to police tone. People, they can do whatever they want. And I respect that right. But I don't, there's just a number of issues there. So I guess does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that is what a lot of social media users want now. People want to be able to be free, and people want to be able to see their timeline and their feed come up in a chronological format, one that is not, automagically algorithming everything into a certain format that best serves the platform's politics and the platform's investors and advertisers. So, I think that's why Radiant Creators and myself over here in the Boiler Room, we're excited to talk to you, because we're having a really hard time finding platforms like this So yeah, that's I think that's the right approach there, and I worry about platforms like you when I see what you're up against, because it's quite the force of politics that you guys are facing. But I personally feel like the stance that you're taking right there is the only appropriate stance to take for a social media platform that wants to move into the future, honestly and openly, and pick up the people that are leaving. I mean, so many people are leaving Facebook. They just had a massive exodus out of there.
Yeah, I know their stock is tanking, and they're in a huge crisis right now. And unfortunately, most people don't know that Facebook owns Instagram. So, they're still hanging out on Instagram. That's the only thing keeping Facebook alive, because it is actually a well-designed app. It just is corrupt and rotten behind the scenes. So, and this is why we're trying to decentralize further, and this is why cryptocurrency matters, and why we need to build infrastructures that aren't even necessarily censorable. Because it doesn't make sense, the targeting of alternative thought from the mass media, because they're backing themselves into a corner where they're demonizing Facebook and Google when they have big hacks. I think overall the mainstream is actually pretty critical of Facebook, especially recently, which is good. But they're also, and to be honest, they've given us pretty fair treatment. If you look at the coverage of us, I think that we are making concerted effort to be balanced and take sort of more of the ACLU approach to free speech. Granted, the ACLU is kind of drifting from their original mandate, but we want to solve these social problems. We think that free speech will actually overpower, quote unquote hate speech, which is a subjective term. But I do think more speech solves problems better. And but by demonizing alternative media and alternative thought, they're not really leaving themselves with many solutions to Facebook and Google. So they're sort of bashing both sides, and they're stuck in the middle as media companies who are not networks, who are reliant on social networks to distribute a lot of their information. So I think that they're going to have to start seeing that there's, it's more complicated than just pigeonholing networks as one way or the other based on supporting free speech.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Craig, what do you think, man? I mean, it seems like Bill's onto something here, and this is something we've talked about before. It's my opinion that it is much more productive to allow people to speak freely on platforms and let the community there, the user community, decide what they like, what they want to upvote, what they want to downvote. If someone is hateful, as they like to say, that is best decided by the user community and not necessarily the service provider.
Yeah, hopefully a healthy social media gathering or platform can just sort of police its own, really. Go back to the old ideal of if you don't like it, don't read it, don't subscribe to it. You can always not follow a channel. You can always block somebody who bugs you. And of course, if somebody really is promoting something illegal, like threatening violence, selling drugs outright or something like that, you can always just, right-click report it, and the system can kind of take care of itself. It's really not a big deal, but it's been made into a big deal. I think also the big media companies, the media cartel, I kind of throw the mainstream media and the big social media into one bucket. And I'd say that they're really slow on getting to where all tech already is. You look at people who have YouTube channels who get tens of thousands or 100,000, views per every video that they make. And that's really better than CNN is doing for the most part. So I think that these big companies these big, I call them monsters, they don't like the competition. I don't think that they like it monetarily. They also don't like it in that I see the mainstream media cartel, like the big social media cartel, as I probably sound a little bit out there, but I see the world as the police protects the state, and then the state funds military that the government uses to protect itself, and the government protects the globalists. And so basically, the Facebooks of the world and such, they're somewhere between like government and globalists. So they have a mission, and I think it's getting harder to do their mission to censor and control in a very authoritarian way. So I think mainstream media and mainstream big social media at this point, they're freaked out. I think for the first time maybe ever, they're threatened. This isn't the days of Walter Cronkite anymore where people just believed. So I think they're in a hard spot, and we see them getting kind of vicious. Like I know for us, Radiant creators, even we're dealing with censorship. It's crazy, and a bit of shadow banning and such. We interviewed Michael Reckenwald, the guy who did Springtime for Snowflakes, and really it was a very respectful interview. We didn't want to incite anybody. We just wanted to really get into what he's talking about and take it from an angle that wasn't going to piss anybody off, because he has some interesting stuff to say about snowflake culture, basically. And ever since then, we're kind of done. Like, we don't have any traffic on Facebook. It was so obvious. If we boost a post, we don't even bother anymore. We've been doomed. They hate us. And so even people who are, not doing anything explicit, not doing anything that's trying to incite any kind of even argument, it's just if you and then we had a Facebook boost stop working for us because one day they decided they didn't like one of the affiliate links we had. It was for something totally legal, just a CBD product, an affiliate link we had on the site, and they went, "Oh no!" And you ask them why. They say, "Oh well, they didn't even put it very nice why they wouldn't let us do any more boosts, but." They just said, "Oh, it's that CBD product," and they're saying that we're like, I guess, promoting illegal drugs or something, and that was the actual line they gave me, and I'm like, but CBD is legal. So it's getting to the point where even people who are, like Radiant Creators is not like Alternate Current. Alternate Current is hard-hitting, real journalism. Radiant Creators is we're happy. We're kind of happy-go-lucky interviewing people, and we can't even really use some of these larger social media platforms anymore. So a question I would lead into is, how are you right now? What is it like over there at Minds? Do you see a lot of people coming to Minds now from Facebook explicitly because of censorship, because they're like, we just can't do business anymore on Facebook, so here we are?
Yeah, definitely. Every time a new scandal hits, we see waves. We also just people who have just reached their tipping point where it's not even worth their time, because you literally don't even get reach there. So it's not like that is what the point of a social network is really supposed to be. Like, people subscribe to you and then they can see your posts. That's it. That is the core technology. And now that doesn't exist. So that all of that is happening. Things are good. We're growing. We're hiring developers. We're not slowing down. So I guess it's interesting in terms of the connection between mass media and Facebook, because Facebook and YouTube have played a part in disrupting the cartel, as you call it, themselves, because they've helped creators to a certain degree, but now they're just getting sucked into the wrong direction. It's like, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, they didn't even get start really on the purest of foundations. I think that there were corruptions from the beginning, but they had platforms, and they still do, where independent creators, if you can navigate the algorithms and the policies, can become as loud as CNN. And it's just it's unfortunate that they take the wrong perspective, and it seems the empirically incorrect perspective about speech, and because there's basically two pools of thought. Some people think that more speech makes healthier societies, and some people think that certain speech directly causes violence. So this is really where we need to hone in and look at the research and understand, like, where do you draw the lines? And based on our research, the First Amendment in the U.S. seems to work the best if you look at societies all over the world. So, speech is not violence. But like you said before, if someone is directly inciting specific violence, then that's actually not legal in the U.S. So I think the U.S. has done a pretty good job with that law. And why would a social network think that they can hire a couple of lawyers and think that they can come up with something that is going to work better than that?
That certainly makes sense. I throw in real quick a question along the lines we're speaking about. Minds, as far as your user data, is that actually protected from Minds also? I mean, what is your view into user data?
Yeah, so we don't require any personal information. So Facebook forces you to say your real name. We don't do that. Like, we allow anonymous accounts. You don't even have to give an email, a real email, if you don't want to. But we do. So we encrypt. We have two models that we're pursuing right now. Minds.com right now is hybrid, centralized and decentralized. So we do store some data. We have servers. It's all encrypted, but we do, like people's email addresses, we do have access to. That's how we send people emails. But we don't require anyone to give us that information. We don't even want it. People's messages we can't read. They're password protected, so we can't even look at them. That's encrypted too. We want to make that end-to-end encrypted. And we're also pursuing a side network called Nomad, which we just launched at Ethereum San Francisco, where it's fully decentralized. So we don't have any data, and it's all peer-to-peer. It's very early stages. We have a prototype going. You have to use the Beaker browser to access it, and that uses a protocol called DAT, which is a peer-to-peer torrent style system. And we use the Ethereum addresses for usernames, and that would be your Minds wallet, because in your Minds wallet you have an Ethereum address for your tokens. And yeah, so we're pursuing that because that's where we want to go. Ultimately, we want users to have as much control over their own data as possible. But, just based on the evolution of tech, we have, things aren't mature enough there yet, but we're focusing on it heavily. We don't personally want to control that data, but in order to create a scalable community where, that's not like a technical spider web for a normal person to navigate, we have had to build the main platform as it is now. But I think you can see the direction that we're moving.
Definitely like that. So peer-to-peer social network called Nomad.
It's on our GitHub too. It's not. It's sort of. It's possible to set up, but you kind of have to be a developer. But over the next year, we're going to be putting a lot more energy into that, and reconsidering how our data architecture is set up.
That's perfection. That is a lot of fun. And then your ID on the network would actually be an Ethereum wallet address.
Yes.
Okay, that is extremely cool. Okay,
but you run into issues with that too, because in a fully decentralized world, the idea of deleting information is much more difficult. Now, that's probably it has benefits because, in terms of censorship, in terms of even scalability, there's cool benefits, but there's also potential consequences of not being able to delete certain things. So we need to balance it and really find a solution that helps make both possible. It's just really, really hard. And unfortunately, the mega networks with billions of dollars aren't focused on building this because they like that data. They like having it in their system.
No, it makes sense. And I also think that with Ethereum, with a lot of crypto, currencies, I'm not sure if we totally know even the security there as far as the visibility of transactions. So if you have an Ethereum address and that's like your ID, then what would the whole world be able to see as far as just that the transactions, that address? It's a big one that you're taking on, but I like it. I think that is definitely the way we're going, and I'm glad that you're taking it on because it's challenging, but that's like where our compass needs to be set.
Yeah, exactly. It's the general path. And yeah, blockchains are mostly pseudonymous. So, it's not fully anonymous. If you know someone's address, then you can kind of check in on the activity of that individual. But, realistically, we're moving towards a more transparent world. And I think that within that, we can increase privacy in certain ways, but it seems with the evolution of technology in general, privacy is eliminating itself. That's not a good thing, and we need to make sure that we preserve it as we go. But I mean, the idea, if you ask somebody 50 years ago if they would be broadcasting their location, microblogging every day to their whole friend network, everything that they're doing. Often a lot of people are live streaming for serious portions of the day. I mean, that is not privacy. That is live streaming your life. So, and that's consensual. So it's just interesting that as tech develops, we know that it's just going to keep invading our privacy. But as we go, which I don't think the big tech companies are really focusing on enough, as we go, we need to just make sure that users have as much granular control as possible over what exactly they're sharing. It seems like inevitably we're going to want to be sharing more, but we just need to just keep some sort of controls in place.
Yeah, and I don't think it's so much the sharing that bothers people. It's just the having control over what they share and who they share it with, because it's like so much technology that's happening right now. It's all good. You just need to get the evil out of it. You know what I mean? So, because if you have a smartphone, you're kind of halfway to being transhuman anyway, and you are live streaming your life. So, I mean, it's happening anyway. It just happens so fast. We kind of, the people, have to get control over it. Because if we don't, those who do have control over it right now, well, we already know what they're doing. So I'll pass it over to Hester.
Yeah, I really like the direction you're headed here, Bill and Craig. So, and I'm one of those people that not even 10 years ago, maybe just 5 years ago, would have said, no way to a lot of this. And here we are in 2018, closing out 2018 pretty soon here, and this is exactly what a lot of people, myself included, are trying to figure out. How do we share and present and broadcast and reap the benefits of technology as it is growing to the point where everybody can have a voice and anybody can follow other people that they have, that they're like-minded with, or whatever the case may be. And it's exciting to see platforms like Minds.com come out and support this. And and also support the First Amendment and the concept of privacy within larger technological means of sharing. So I'm curious, do you have any other apps, tech tools, browsers, search engines, anything? What else do you recommend for people, for users out there that want to, use technology and social media to its fullest, but are still mindful of their own privacy and want to have that granular control over what gets shared to whom and maybe how it's used?
Yeah, definitely. This is really important. I'm glad you brought it up because it's about all layers of, your own personal stack. So what OS are you running on your computer? Don't use, I hate to say it, but Mac OS. Don't use Windows. Use Linux-based OSs. Like, Debian and Ubuntu are easy. It feels just like Mac, basically. I mean, you're not going to as easily be able to install every little app that you want, but it pretty much feels the same, and it feels so much better at the end of the day. Using Brave and Firefox as opposed to Safari and Chrome. I mean, those types of little decisions have massive impact, and it's really hard. I mean, I'm not even claiming to be like 100% pure with regard, I'm on, we're on Skype right now.
Right.
So, but I do like you. So we're actually about to integrate a video conferencing tool into Minds called Jitsi, which I recommend you check out. It's a open source and encrypted video conferencing platform that is really good. So you might even be able to figure out a way to do these types of interviews and record through there. But for all of the little components of your tech, there's a cool site called prismbreak.org. I think that's it. And it goes through literally like documents, everything that you could think, and shows the proprietary and then open source alternatives.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a great resource. I'm going to be sure and put that on today's show notes. And just to remind all the live listeners and people who are picking this up on the podcast, you're listening to Radiant Creators on alternatecurrentradio.com. And this is Hester from the Boiler Room here, sitting shotgun with Radiant Creators. And we are interviewing Mr. Bill Ottman of Minds.com. Over to you, Craig.
Thanks a lot for the station identification there. That's actually a question I was going to ask, was features that are coming to Minds. Now, you mentioned video, and it's called Jitsi. Is that Jitsy?
SI.
SI. Okay. And then if somebody wanted to start messing with that, is that available now on Minds, or is that separate?
That's coming out very soon. That's a teaser. But you can just search Jitsi, probably on DuckDuckGo, not Google. Don't Google it.
I was going to ask. Yep. But
DuckDuckGo, unfortunately, DuckDuckGo is not open source, but they are seemingly privacy focused. So I think that they're certainly better to use. I know that the results aren't quite as satisfying, but they're good enough, and you kind of have to. Richard Stallman is a really awesome individual who is the co-founder of GNU Linux and the Free Software Foundation. He's always talking about the distinction between convenience and freedom, and that you shouldn't just upfront sacrifice your freedom for a little bit of convenience with everything that you do, because it's what causes us to be in the type of situation that we're in now. So it's like, to a degree, we all need to chill out, be a little bit more patient, and build things from the ground up the right way, even if it takes a little bit longer, because it will just avoid so many of the negative ramifications.
Definitely. And yeah, I'm trying to give up OS 10 myself. I mean, having been a systems admin and different things for almost 25 years now, I love OS 10 because I love Linux, I love Unix, and OS 10 is such an incredibly nice way to do it. But at the same time, I do know that I should be using Ubuntu. I should be using something else.
You should dual boot. I
dual
find,
boot.
Yeah. That was how I kind of got my foot in the door. And then depending on what you're trying to do that day, you can, when you turn your computer on, you say, okay, what am I doing today? Am I just going to be, browsing the web? There's no need to be on Mac if you're just browsing. If there's specific applications that you need from that, because you haven't gotten to the point where you can do it on Ubuntu, then make that decision one by one. But at least you're starting to move some of your activity over into the more ethical area.
Oh, definitely. And I along those lines, I like to sometimes use the Wine project, and then where you can run Windows apps under Linux. So I've always kind of considered that keeping the monster in the cage. Well, Minds, do you have a plan for something like a Minds tube, kind of like a YouTube in the future? And also, how about a Minds email? Have you ever thought about partnering with someone like Proton Mail or something where they could handle the back end and it wasn't something you really had to hassle with at all?
Yeah. I mean, we do support video now, up to 15 minutes. And the only reason we have a limit is just because it's so expensive. But we do host native video. So if you can attach them to your newsfeed posts now. And we're going to be expanding that and improving the player and everything much more. But initial incarnation exists. In regards to email, yeah, I mean, it's just one thing at a time. And ultimately what we're trying to do is be an open source, decentralized, encrypted alternative to, everything that Google has. But it's such a massive undertaking that we just have to go one thing at a time.
Okay, that sounds good. So how is the user base growing? I believe Minds is at about 1.5 million users now. How are the numbers stacking up?
Yeah, they're good. I mean, they need to be better. I think that we need to hit the next order of magnitude, and so that's what I'm focused really hard on right now, is how to cause a new spark of network effects. And I think it has to do with incentives. It has to do with referrals. It has to do with influencers and, picking the right influencer partners who are going to help inject us into the public consciousness a little bit deeper. But at the same time, we need to make sure we're ready for that wave. I think we are. So it's hard to predict. I mean, our growth, we've had times where we gain like 250,000 users in a week. So that can happen anytime. And it's important that it keeps happening. But it also comes down to the individual. I mean, if every one of our users invited, 10 friends, then we would achieve that order of magnitude. So that's where the referral thing comes into play, making it easy for people to bring in their network, probably incentivizing that somehow. But yeah.
Oh, definitely. Because I know I still have a Facebook account, but it's only for business, really. And there are so many great groups. Like if you like military dioramas, if you like to collect old pairs of pliers, I mean, you name it. There are amazing groups on Facebook, and it has that volume. And that's the thing that's kind of an edge it has right now, is the volume of people. I mean, Is there an angle you would kind of recommend or that you've thought of getting those groups over to Minds? Because I keep thinking what I want to do is go to all my favorite groups on Facebook where there's really amazing content and amazing community, and without stepping on anybody's toes, without getting Facebook mad, and also in a way that people will approach, that is approachable for people, I can say, hey, I made this group, the same one, over here on Minds. Why don't you come over?
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I think that I sometimes find that pitching is important, and presenting it to people you think would be ready to supplement their social media with something new, who are disillusioned. But at the same time, I sense that in order to achieve tens and hundreds of millions of users, there's going to have to be something different that causes that seismic shift. I mean, I one of the more inspiring viral events that I've seen, which was also kind of scary, was actually when Pokemon Go went super viral. It was scary because you saw these videos of like herds of people running into like Central Park with their phones trying to capture Pokemon, because it was like an augmented reality app. And they got like 250 million users or something absurd like that just within a very short period of time. It was just like everyone was suddenly inspired, and there was a mass activation, and it had to do with this augmented reality like game. And so that's why I'm so interested in gamification, and with our reward system and our sort of token game where you earn the tokens for your contributions, then you can use them to boost your posts for more views. I think that if we can work on the UX a little bit more and gamify everything more, I think that there's a lot of potential to achieve something like that. So that's what I'm working on big time behind the scenes, is trying to understand how we can achieve something like that.
Definitely. It's that viral event, like when there's a Pokemon Minds, that will be boom, overnight, 1 million users. I definitely could see that happening. Well, I know we're reaching an hour. I'm not sure how much time you've got. I just wanted to ask about the Internet Bill of Rights that people are constantly talking about these days, and what your feelings on that are. And I'll just interject real quick. For me, I think that we need to stop looking to governments to fix things, because ultimately they're kind of like paying the mob for protection. If the Internet Bill of Rights is created by a government that then makes it a law, that then enforces it, I don't know if that's going to create anything good at all.
Yeah, we actually launched, we endorsed a set of principles which we called like a Bill of Rights, which is called the Manila Principles, which the Electronic Frontier Foundation helped outline, which has to do with digital intermediary liability for content, and basically talking about how intermediaries, whether it's ISP, domain registrar, social network, whatever, shouldn't really be liable for the content on their platforms, and that, you know, there should have to be some sort of like a legal reason for taking down the content. Now, we do have to take down content without court orders, because, you know, it's just not realistic that we would have to wait for a court order to take down everything. Sometimes it's just obvious that something is illegal in it. But, you know, that principle of intermediaries not being liable and users knowing that the network is dedicated to not being in charge of the content, that the law can sort of be handling that. So we endorse that, and I hope that more networks and digital companies will get involved with that. But I mean, I agree with you that a Bill of Rights that some non-tech legislators draft is potentially very dangerous. So before we rush to regulation and legislation, we need to make sure that we understand what exactly is going to be put into law. And that's why, the Manila Principles and all the organizations who crafted them, they were technologists. They understood. So it's like there's already been things that have been outlined that I think we could present to Congress, which, aren't necessarily putting that power into people who don't even understand technology's hands.
Oh, definitely. Because right now, if Congress was to make an Internet Bill of Rights, who are going to be their consultants? Oh, well, probably Google and Facebook and the mainstream media and, people who I think have malicious intent in the very beginning. We're going to have, corporations protecting corporate interests like mainstream media dominance, and the same thing, mainstream social media dominance. So I'll pass it over to Hester.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up EFF, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation.org has been great. I've always appreciated everything that they do and their presence on the internet, and I think that is the correct approach there, to take the Manila Principles and combine with just our normal constitutionality that we already have and the laws that are on the books already. I mean, there's no need to, as you say, bring in giant CEOs from Fortune 500s and Silicon Valley giants to craft some sort of new Bill of Rights for the internet. I mean, we've already seen what these sorts of politicized and political groups do when they get together and try to figure out how to police the internet.
Look what happened with SOPA, right. And it's always like Stop Online Piracy Act. That was, luckily that caused the largest internet protest in history, where dozens of major networks went dark to protest it, because it would have just been a huge piece of censorship legislation. But it's cloaked in good intentions. Stop piracy. Okay, yeah. Everyone wants to stop piracy. There was another recent one, stop. It was like a sex trafficking bill that also had disastrous. Obviously we want to stop sex trafficking. And this is how the language of the bill was worded. But there's so much else buried in there that is really problematic.
Right. It's like they use a public relations wrapping around these bills, and they don't make the bills accessible to everyday people. Or if they do, it's written in such a way that, it's written in legalese, and it's, thousands of pages long, and it's written by, corporate lawyers and people who are not even internet users in some cases. So, yeah, I really appreciate, that aspect of Minds.com. And I guess I would also, I know there's probably a lot of listeners out there who feel like I did about Facebook, back in 2009 when it first started. It was like, oh, this is great. Same with Google. Oh, this is awesome. It works just the way I want, and it does all these things. And, then a few years later, a little ways in the future, all of a sudden it starts to change, and they feel like there's this bait and switch. And I just want to give you the opportunity to answer, do Minds.com users need to worry about heavy-handed investors changing the company down the road, or the philosophy, or a massive buyout? I mean, if you look at Larry Ellison, Oracle, or Facebook, they tend to just absorb everything around them that competes with them. So what's your long-term future like in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, obviously not. I mean, but I also don't want to get into a position where it's like I'm asking people to trust me, because I don't think that makes sense either. So, I haven't been doing this for, any other reason than to make a competitive top ethical social network. But it shouldn't be the type of architecture where I or others at Minds are in a position to sell it out. So that's why decentralization is so important, because it's sort of like letting the genie out of the bottle, and it just can't be stopped. So, we're never going to bring in partners who would compromise our philosophy and, don't have any plans of selling the company. And at the same time, we just want to build something that prevents that just based on its nature.
Excellent. Well, I love the platform. I personally think it looks better just from a UX standpoint. I always talk about looking at Facebook as staring into the blue and white void of corporatism and authoritarian government and data collection, whereas, and that's aesthetic and reality right there when it comes to Facebook. And you look at the amount of hours that people put into staring into their Facebook on their phones and on their computers and in the workplace, it has gotten ridiculous to the point where I feel like is no longer a benefit. And there are studies showing that it is it's a detriment to young people, especially the way that it's used, the way that it's promoted, the way the algorithms tend to trick the mind into just flicking through it over and over again all day long. And there's just a different feel when you look at Minds.com on the mobile app. The mobile app is beautiful. On the screen, it looks really nice, and you can feel the difference. So I just want to let you know that we here at Alternate Current Radio and the Boiler Room and Radiant Creators, we're going to do everything that we can to back you and to make sure that our listeners know that we're on Minds.com and that is the place where people who value, the sort of things that we're talking about in this discussion, that's where we're hanging out. And if there's ever anything we can do to help you out, we're here for you. And just like to thank you for your time. And I'll pass it over to Craig to close out. Thank you, Bill.
All right. Well, yeah, definitely. Thank you, Bill Ottman, for being on the show today. And when it comes to that viral app or that viral happening that takes things to the next level, or the next level of order of magnitude for Minds, I have a feeling that really could be Jitsi, because, and I look forward to seeing that rolled out, because Alternate Current Radio and Radiant Creators, there's so many content creators that are doing interviews just like this, and we're using Skype because it does work really well. And if there was an alternative that worked, especially that came from Minds, I know that we'd hop on it tomorrow. I mean, definitely. And
I think that really that rings true for, when people have the decision before them, okay, am I going to use Skype or Facebook, or am I going to use, Minds? If they will pick Minds if we can provide something that is functionally competitive. And so I appreciate the feedback on the UX. I still think we have work to do, but that's good to hear that you think that it looks and feels good. And yeah, that's our priority, to just making it easy. So, I'll give you the heads up once the video chat goes live. I send you guys some tokens to play around with, and just, hit me up when you have suggestions or issues. And we're just trying to build something that benefits creators. So if there's, I'd be curious, like your top wishes, your top suggestions, because there's really no reason for us to build things that aren't the priority of the creators.
Oh, well, I would throw in one thing I know I'd love to see is, I like the tokens, but the Minds tokens are cool. I'm just there's still, I think they're still escaping a lot of people on being able to actually purchase them and understand them. Because I know for me, like all I do is crypto all day for a living, basically. And I'm still a little bit unsure on the Minds token. I definitely appreciate you sending some. But on the actual purchasing of them, because I understand that I make an ETH wallet, and then that is what I can send, like, and that's how I buy the Minds tokens. And you use the MetaMask plugin, but I'm still, I'm having a little bit of trouble with it. And I think if I am, since kind of crypto is my living, I think it still might be over the heads of a good deal of people. Do you find that there's a challenge? Are people buying them? Where are you guys at in that development? And I'll just let the show end with that.
Yeah, I mean, let's work through that specifically just to make sure there's nothing really wrong. But yeah, interesting. We're selling more tokens than we used to sell points, which was just before we had tokens, we had points, which was running on our own system, and you could buy those with a credit card. And we're actually selling more tokens than points. So that's strange. But yeah, I mean, the idea of sending Ethereum to a smart contract and then the smart contracts sending out the Minds tokens to you is, unfortunately, it is a little bit complex. We're right now looking at being able to send a ACH, so you can connect your bank account and it will send you tokens, just so that we can integrate fiat, which is a little bit more manageable for people. Unfortunately, it's against Stripe's terms to sell crypto. So we wanted to, but we really couldn't. But we wanted to pivot to a crypto model. So let's follow up. I mean, I think that there's probably something simple that maybe it's a UX tweak that we should, that shouldn't be so hard for you. So hit me up after the show.
I will. Thanks a lot. Yeah, and I'll make a video on Minds on how to do it. So thanks a lot. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thanks, everybody. Be in touch.
Thanks for listening to Radiant Creators. Check out more content at radiantcreators.com. If you like the show, give it a like. Share this. Comment. Keep the conversation going. You can also find us at alternatecurrentradio.com, where there's this show and a lot more.